Okay. You see a button saying you're being recorded?
No.
Okay. Well, are
For a
you
brief
okay?
second, it said me, but that was it.
That's me. That's Marcus Evans.
Oh,
Sorry.
yeah. No.
Uh,
Yeah, I don't see
you
anything
said,
saying recording.
are you okay with being recorded?
Yes, as long as you can see that button, I can't.
Okay. Yeah, it's recording, so this should
Sure,
work
go
out.
for it. All right.
I wanted to say thank you for doing this interview. This is part of our panel discussion from a California conference on talking with people around different states across of America who are conservative and feel that the division between the left and right, whatever the right terms you like, is getting pretty bad. And that it would be better for some of us to have a national conversation about a peaceful divorce as an option rather than forcing ourselves to uh, make it work anymore, and that
Yeah.
seeming to result in Portland style riots and beatings.
Right,
Uh,
and none of us want that. I lean toward the conservative side of libertarianism. The Republicans have kind of abandoned my principles as well. I'm more of a Reagan conservative. I try to be as fiscally responsible as I can. And we've seen in the last 15 years, especially since 9/11, the Republicans love to spend just as much as the Democrats do. So I'm still tend toward conservatism, but it's more libertarianism now. And one of the key principles there is non-aggression. And yeah, no one wants to see riots in the streets or 70s style Kent State and all that kind of stuff.
Good analogy. Yeah. Um, Tell me a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and what brought you to this coalition? What are you seeing now in America regarding discourse? Does it seem to be worse than it was just a few years ago?
It seems like it. And I haven't dived deep into it yet, but I kind of think back that there's probably always been some level of division. You look back at the revolution, and the generic analogy is one third were in favor of it, one third were loyal to the crown, and one third just wanted to be left alone.
Mm, mm.
And then you have things like the Civil War and various other events throughout history, the 1960s. And I think we've always had a level of dissent, but I think it's at a point now where the culture is actually changing. I still, what I've always been, so I was born in Jersey. I've lived in 7 states, I think it is, on both coasts and Northeast, Southwest. Jersey, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, Jersey another couple times, Ohio, Arizona, California, Arizona, Texas, and back to Arizona.
Right.
So I'm a bit of a gypsy. Arizona is kind of where I consider myself from, and we tend to be a little kind of crazy down here. It's probably the heat, but we've always. I see it less now, and it could be the California influx has diluted it. I remember we moved here in '83, and growing up here, there was a pretty fierce independence streak. Goldwater was still our senator at that time. I remember there was actually talk back then, various groups of Arizona wanting to secede.
Mm.
And so it's nothing new here, but like I say, I haven't heard much talk of that recently. Aside from me setting up the group that I did on Facebook to support your effort. And I'm not necessarily a proponent of secession. I think if we were smart, we could probably figure out how to fix it. I think there's a lot of us though that are just so frustrated that nobody wants to talk, that maybe it's better to separate for a while and figure it out and then maybe join up again later if we feel it's right at that point.
Mm.
But going back to growing up here as a teenager and all, and kind of the rebellious streak, Arizona's always tried to kind of tell the feds to go screw themselves. We were the ones that kind of forced the hand on the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit breaking.
Oh,
We have
okay.
very bad stretches. Us and Montana joined in behind us. I think Texas may have helped a bit, But as I remember, we were the first ones to pass a resolution or a law in the state house that bumped it. I think they bumped it to 65 at first, and the feds threatened to take their highway money from us. And we basically kind of said, well, screw you. And I think briefly they caved in, but then enough other states like the Montanas and the states that have vast stretches of just nothingness said this doesn't make sense. It takes us 4 days to get from town to town out here. And so there's always kind of been that rebel streak. Maybe going along with that, and maybe because technically Arizona, not that I'm a supporter of slavery or anything, but technically Arizona was Confederacy during the
Right.
Civil War. So there's a little memory of that, I think. And I just remember, like I said, it was a lot more in the 80s. I noticed that we were a little more rebellious than we are now, but maybe that got in my blood. And I've always been a believer. And again, it could be because I had some influence as a teenager being a Confederate state and learn the Confederate history here, which wasn't vast. There was one battle in the Civil War, and it wasn't even between the North and the South. It was between, I believe, it was between one of the two and an Indian tribe. But it
Heard
was
of that.
claimed to be a battle of the Civil War because the tribe was allied with one of the sides, whichever side it was.
Yeah, yeah,
All
yeah.
that long story, I've always been a believer that the states, even before that point, the states have a right to secede. To me, it's just illogical to say they don't. The federal government was formed as a mechanism to help 13 individual states, which at that time the word state was used synonymously with nation. When you talk about the leader of France, he's a statesman. State previously, until we created our form of a state, has always been an independent and free state. So you had 13 different nations that kind of had a similar culture, having all originated from England. They came together and created the federal government. My way of thinking has always been that a mom and dad get together and have a child. That's sort of what the colonies did. Well, at that time, they were free. We had broken away from England. We had a peace treaty. We went through Articles of Confederation for a decade plus before the Constitution. We came together as 13 independent nations and said, we need this to do things like mutual defense makes sense. It's like when you go to Costco, it's a buying club. There's certain
Right.
things that make sense to do in volume versus individually. The money
Yeah.
supply, we all spoke the same language. So money, defense, and regulating business between the states, because there were states that would heavily tax other states. And so they said, okay, this doesn't work, let's form this mechanism. To me, the states, and years ago, if you look at my Facebook profile, there's a group I started, and I haven't even touched it in years, but I was pissed off about something at one point when I lived in California. And I created a group called The States Created the Fed, not the other way around, or something to that effect. And that's what I've always believed is we control it as states. We choose to come together. I have a real hard time, especially growing up in the 80s under Reagan. And I think you're about the same era.
Yeah.
Reagan pushed and our country pushed as the Soviet Union was breaking. It was huge. We thought nuclear war was coming, all that. And Reagan pushed us
Yeah.
to the line. He basically played a ballsy game of chicken with the Soviets and won. And you
Right.
had Georgia. I think Georgia and Ukraine may have been the first couple to break off, but we supported all these little Soviet republics. Actually, I think it was the Baltics, Latvia, and those. But we supported all of these little Soviet satellites breaking away to be free and independent. But we say California doesn't have a right if they choose to go their own way. That doesn't make sense to me. Texas has a right to go its own way if it chooses. Nobody should be forced out. I think once you join, you sort of get to ride along whether you're participating or not. And we know there's a lot of states that take in a lot more federal money than they provide. Places like Texas provide more federal money than they get. So you have situations like that where once you're in, I think, but maybe it's like Fight Club that that you're in Fight Club or you're not in Fight Club.
Right.
But I think California has a right to decide within California if it wants to stay or if it wants to go. It'd be like
Yeah,
what, the sixth or seventh largest economy in the world if it were on its own.
fifth, but yeah, we
Yeah,
fluctuate.
yeah.
Absolutely. Well, let me ask you, we have members from North Carolina, the Dakotas,
Hmm.
Red Oregon, upstate New York, South Carolina, um, New Hampshire, and all of them are saying, "Wow, it's getting very divisive.
Yeah.
It's appearing that left and right can't work together like they used to even keep something together." Do you share that observation?
Oh, yeah. Look at Congress. I mean, right now we're doing an impeachment thing, but they don't want to officially vote on impeachment because that would kick certain rules in that would let the conservatives be able to call their witnesses and ask their questions. So they do it behind closed doors.
Yeah,
I don't know whether it's just, and ultimately, I think some people don't understand my concept when I say this. When there's, especially when there's like a government shutdown, I say, great, that means they can't pass laws that take freedoms away from us. Why would you hate a government shutdown? Because the checks still run, contrary to scare tactics that they try to tell you. Social Security checks still go out. It's an automated process. I
yeah,
know
true.
because during a shutdown, I know someone that got a Social Security check. So it happens. It's
Oh
scare
yeah.
tactics. So there's the part of me that wonders, okay, is it all just a shell game? They do all this publicly while they kind of have a little plan behind the scenes, or whether they really aren't getting along.
Mm.
So yeah, I support the concept for any state. The Dakotas can go their own way if they choose.
What about within a state? So you have riots in Portland, Oregon, where 80-90% of the land of Oregon is conservative, and then two cities have vastly different political understandings and force their will on 90%.
Right.
Is that fair? Or
And
would
it's
people?
similar. It's probably not as disproportionate, but California is very much the same. You have pockets when you look at the county, you look at your red and blue counties. You've got plenty of red territory out there. It's
Sure.
just they're packed in tighter in those blue areas, so they're more unbalanced. Maybe not, again, not quite as disproportionate as Oregon, but uh, I think it's a harder question breaking a state up than it is to say a state can leave because
Oh,
the state came in with the boundaries that it has. So I think it's free to leave with the boundaries it has.
interesting. Hmm.
It gets hard once you start saying, okay, yeah, you can split this up. You get down to, okay, well, I don't like my neighbor because he painted his house the wrong color. And it gets down to Gulliver's Travels, if you know the satire of Gulliver's
Yeah.
Travels. Big enders and narrow enders or small enders, whatever they called it. It was the most ridiculous. They were at war for 20 years or whatever it was because of how they chose to break open their hard boiled eggs in the morning.
Right.
I think you get down to that level where once you start to say, okay, yeah, maybe LA County can break off or Portland can break off. First off, there's no incentive for Portland to break by itself. They're kind of living off of the productivity of the rest of the state. So I don't even know if it would happen if you were to even put it to a vote if it could pass because again you have the disproportionate number of people in the area that's taking the benefit
Hmm.
from all of those farmers and loggers and the rest of them that have the economic productivity. Not to say Portland doesn't have its own. You've got Nike up there and Columbia clothing companies up there. There's quite a few big companies up there that probably would be in the state of Portland or whatever you wanted to call it. But I think you get down to a lot more of a hard to manage level once you start saying this place can split and that place can split. Because if you want to get down to it, when you look at Texas, when it was admitted to the union, to use that concept of, okay, well, Portland can break off, or maybe, Orange County can break off, kind of reverse that logic of let's already accept that the state itself can leave. So let's say Texas leaves. Well, what if Texas says, oh, by the way, we're leaving and we want our original borders back? If you look up a map of what Texas looked like before 1845, its western border went to the Rio Grande. It also was the panhandle of Oklahoma. It had the bottom corner of Kansas up to, I think it's the Red River before it goes east. Texas actually, it still has a panhandle, but that panhandle goes all the way up into Wyoming. The good
My
thing, if
family's
we
there.
can break Texas off, is we can get them some really sweet ski resorts because that would all fall within the old borders. But see, I think that's where we're going with that is once you start saying, okay, you can break in these little pieces, for one, you become theoretically you could survive probably because you have places like Liechtenstein and Andorra and the Vatican. That Vatican
I'm
might be a
impressed,
bad
sir.
example. What's that?
I'm impressed. Most people don't know about those tiny countries.
Oh yeah, and they survive. What Monaco is two
Very high
square
standard of
miles.
living. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
there's plenty of countries that are small that support themselves quite nicely. I think Switzerland probably can fit inside of all of Maricopa County, which is where I live. Um,
With the
so
famous
the
sheriff,
size
right?
doesn't necessarily say you can't do it. Um, I think at first we would probably just need, let's focus our efforts on, okay, California can be free, Texas can be free if they choose.
That's an interesting take. That's an interesting take. So a state leaving seems more plausible than splitting of a state.
Well, because when you look at it, it was a state that came in. It wasn't like Charlotte that came in. It was the entire, I forget, Charlotte, North or South Carolina, but it was the entire state that came in. It
Red
wasn't
State
Baltimore.
Secession said the same thing. Red
Who
State
said?
Secession
Yeah.
Indiana, he said the same thing you said. I was shocked to hear that.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, because when you look at it, and again, going back to the small nation thing, yeah, it might be feasible, but why don't we look at just taking care of the big thing first? Let's break things up if that's and I come down on we had whoever ends up viewing this probably isn't going to know some of the backstory. There was I was probably suffering from some high altitude sickness because I was up at about 8,000 feet recently, and I had a little bit of an issue with some ways some of the things were going on our coalition behind the scenes, and I expressed myself pretty firmly. I support everyone to have their own viewpoint. That's part of what America is about. And I'll support any of the people that I may have, and hopefully they didn't take it the wrong way, but it was, I'm looking at it as if this does take off and pick up the steam that we would want, once you start getting on CNN or some, and I said this in one of the emails, you're going to have some hungry reporter that wants to make a name for himself, and he's going to dig up all of our dirt. They're going to dig up my DUIs. I went through a divorce, and in a 5-week period, I got 2 DUIs. I'm not proud of, but the
uh,
point is, we all have something, and we know how they go. Look, they're going after a phone call that on the House floor, a member of the House of Representatives made up a fake transcript that he read, knowing that media would pick up on it. And 80% of people, at least, probably more, only listen to sound bites. So they're going to hear those sound bites and they're going to run with that. I hear it at
I
my office
agree.
all the time. There's this one girl across the way. She hears the 30-second sound bite, and that's all I have to hear the next day. I'm like, that's not really what happened, let me tell you. So that's my issue is I don't want, all of us have the right to have our views, and I support that 100%. I'm just saying we need to be careful on when it goes big, because I guess I'm an optimist on that point is I'd like to see it go big.
I think it will. We've only grown. We had three
Yeah.
states and we got a national article. When we had 8 states, we got network TV.
Mm-hmm.
When we had 10 states, we got a presidential candidate.
Yeah.
So, and everything that I've seen is showing uh, people get this concept and people are scared about the way things are going.
Yes.
The media may laugh at this idea of the concept of a second civil war. I hope it doesn't. But when I talk to people, everybody takes it real damn seriously that things are getting bad and they're only ratcheting up and nobody knows where it ends. Ben Shapiro was on an interview 2 weeks ago. That guy's a
Mm-hmm.
major conservative.
Yeah.
And you could see the look in his eyes when they go, "Where's this going?" He goes, "I hope somebody's thinking about how to calm this down." And
Yeah.
I was like, that's not how Shapiro normally talks. He talked about hope. He doesn't use that word.
Right.
He seemed exasperated He doesn't do that. And I was like, wow, a guy that close to the national debate
Mhm.
looked genuinely terrified
Yeah.
with no idea about how this ends. And then last night on the Democratic presidential debates, they talked about Ellen DeGeneres hugging George
Yeah.
W. Bush or hanging out with him. And they asked everybody, talk about someone that you're friends with from the opposite political side. You could clearly tell the establishment was trying to build bridges and cause healing. And today I saw where Twitter has violently reacted against CNN for even trying to do that. So CNN said, hey, we're going to have all the presidential candidates who are liberals talk about how they have a friend who's conservative. Twitter exploded and said, that's horrible. How dare you, CNN? I hate CNN now and I'm a liberal. How dare you even have that segment?
Yeah.
So that's this week
Yeah.
when we're talking about division. The public seems to want it.
Yeah. And again, rather than start shooting, I think it would be a good idea. I don't, you see memes go around on Facebook and stuff that of conservatives especially, and I'll point my finger. If you were to look at just straight numbers, I guarantee more conservatives are gun owners than non-conservatives.
Right.
It it's I probably don't even have to look for more than 10 minutes to find 30 different studies on that. Um, but that doesn't mean that if enough people organized from the left, Antifa, I'm thinking offhand, that because Antifa, I think, would be one of the triggers of it. And again, everyone has a right to their opinion. They don't have a right to violence.
Right.
When I see them marching and clubbing people with the U bicycle locks, and they're seeing the blood explode out of this guy's head, and I don't know how the guy wasn't in a coma. He walked away, but the clip I saw, this guy just had blood that just exploded out of his head. He got hit with this bike lock. When you're that ratcheted up, it's only a matter of time before 30 of you get together and go out and arm up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Both
so
sides seem to
I
blame the
think
other
it could
side.
head there. Yeah.
I Left blames the right, right blames blah blah blah. I will say that I have, as a liberal, and I love being a liberal, but I'm also raised to tell the truth
Mm-hmm.
and to recognize when your own side pushed it too far.
Yeah.
And I am
Oh,
the
me too.
only liberal that I know who brings up that Kamala Harris, who's from California
Mm-hmm.
and gets to run for the presidency, the highest office, and talks about how Trump incites violence, made a joke about shooting him in the head.
Yeah. Yeah. And they
I
think it's funny.
made a
And for
joke
them,
about
it's
shooting a president in the face, and then you get to run for the office. I've
right.
never seen that before or heard of that in my life.
And I think the liberal bias in the media, they let them laugh it off. You look at just something today that I heard. We have the whole Biden thing and his son getting paid for basically knowing nothing about Ukraine or gas or any of that. And I don't, I'm a cable cutter, so I didn't see the debates. I only pick up what I'm able to gather the next day from various media sources, which I'm jaded, of course, so I don't always trust them. But I heard the clip. So they're going after Donald Trump Jr. for something right now related to business. And they think it's completely justified and you have to turn over everything. But Joe Biden says, my son did nothing wrong. He's a good guy. They need to leave him alone. And he thinks that that's fine. But yet the other side says they could use the same exact words and they'd say, no, we have a right to investigate you. We're going to investigate you. You're going to jail. So it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, it doesn't work.
I saw yeah, that it seems to be tribalism.
Yep.
As long as my side wins, I don't give a damn. Uh I We won. And
Yes.
I think when you look at the impeachment hearings on Trump, which I'm not going to talk about Trump, you know where we stand here in California, but I will
Yeah.
say this. If you're trying to show that it's about healing the country, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that it's the right thing to do, why don't you pass a vote? Why don't you let Republicans call their witnesses so that
Right.
nobody can say it was biased? I think he did it.
Yeah.
But I also understand of the thing of having a trial that nobody gets to contend or debate or say it was rigged or unfair. So
Right.
when the reaction comes out, it's just accepted. And I see the liberals having not worried about that at all. They're like, no,
Right.
we're going to get them and everybody's just going to deal with it. And
Yeah,
I'm
and
thinking,
that's
that's when
part
people
of
this.
yeah, that's part of the issue is yeah, you would have people that were unhappy because it would go exactly the way it went with Clinton. It'll get in there, and Mitch McConnell will basically set up the rules because that's his right as the leader of that particular House and Senate, but House of within the
Yeah,
representatives. You know,
yeah,
what I mean,
yeah.
he has the right to make the rules, just as in the 90s, the Democrats had the right to make the rules. They made the rules, they brought it in. You had the trial, boom, it's over, not guilty. It'll go exactly the same way. There's zero chance he'll be convicted in the Senate. You have people like Mitt Romney who is posturing like, oh, all I have to do is bring six guys over. You're not going to bring six guys over because you'll probably have a few senators from the Democrat side that are in relatively red states that are going to say, I'm not voting for an impeachment so that I lose my reelection.
Right.
So Mitt Romney can live in fantasy world all he wants. The guy's a three-time loser at this point, and basically just moves to a different state whenever he feels like running for something else. You're governor of Massachusetts, and you try to for
Oh,
president, lose a few times. I have no problem saying it. And my issue with Romney, he's a lightweight Republican to begin with, and very establishment. Which obviously that's why I say I'm libertarian because the establishment is no longer a Reagan Goldwater establishment. It's now a cocktail party establishment, and they give the red meat to the conservatives that they know the conservatives want, and it's just a big game, I think, ultimately. But yeah, in the streets though, you look at the Antifas and stuff, and you won't have the politicians if the when the trial goes with Trump being fully acquitted. You won't have the Democrats in office doing anything like that, but you'll have the Antifas and you'll have the left at that point that are upset, that could
yeah.
start that
That is
that
a,
shooting that we're all talking about that we don't want to see happen. If you're willing to club someone in the head with a bike lock 2 years ago just because you don't like where they're standing at the time, it's not too far when you start getting that much more pissed off that you're picking up the heavier weapons. And that's what
I,
we're trying to
yeah,
avoid.
yeah. As I always point out to people, they called it Bloody Kansas. And it went on for a year, 2 years before the Civil War. And everybody said, well, that's there.
Yep.
It won't get worse. That's just a isolated incident. And now we know, no, that was a harbinger. And
Yep.
you just ignored it. And I'm
Mhm.
wondering, are we looking at Portland and going, that's there, that would never expand, that's not going to get bigger? And are people going to be looking in history going, folks, that was your crystal knocked? That
Yep.
was the time to go, whoa.
Well, we're already seeing shades of that, and I don't have a problem calling it out. I tend to say stupid things at times that piss people off, but I think I've mostly been right. The Nazis came to power by saying that they were going to fix a problem. Germany started a fight that they lost in World War One. They paid a heavy price for it at the treaty table, probably too heavy. Looking back, you can
Yeah,
see how the people that wanted the power, the Hitlers and the Mussolinis, used the misfortune and the reparations that the Axis had to pay back. That was one of the things. Germany was so impoverished at the time, and they were using currency as wallpaper. It was so worthless, and they were
yeah,
literally. I've seen the old film of the wheelbarrows full of money to go down to buy a loaf of bread or a jug of milk. The Nazis played on the people's fears of where the economy and the country was going, and and they found a scapegoat in the Jews and the Gypsies and the Poles and everybody other homosexuals, any other group they didn't like became the bad guys, and oh, they're the ones that are our problem. You need to put us in power and we'll take care of it. And yeah, it's very easy that the right politician could come along and say exactly the same thing. You know,
Yeah,
Beto, I think Beto has already, I think he's an incompetent boob that sticks his foot deeper in his mouth than is probably comfortable for him. Not a supporter of somebody like a Hitler or Mussolini at all, but I think they were much more strategic on picking their words. I think part of the problem could be the instant nature of our media today. You know, back then it was you had to report it by a newspaper. But saying things like oh yes, we're coming to your house and we're taking the guns. He's not even hearing the words coming out of his mouth as they're coming out, because that's the kind of stuff that'll get you get enough people starting to believe that, and he could get elected and think he has a mandate to do it then.
Well,
It's
that's not
not
really
that far
scary.
along.
Let's skip ahead to because we're at half an hour now,
Okay.
and it's been awesome. I love talking with you because you just put it out there. A lot of people, I got to coax them into it, and you're just like, nope, here's what I think,
Yeah.
and that's great. I mean, that's what we want.
Well, you shouldn't have to be coaxed if it's what you believe. Like I said, and my big thing and part of the coalition that you have, the biggest criticism I probably have, it's your right to do it, do whatever you want as California. We can, like my Facebook group, I can put the word out and hey, you know, check out this video, do this or that. I think there may be a little too much relying on those of us out here. You don't need our permission at all. Go and do what you want and need to do. That's where I stand. That's my core principle going way back to the, okay, 13 countries came together. It's their right. You know, Rhode Island didn't have to sign on, and then they wouldn't have been part of it. You know, all of these states didn't have to sign on. They didn't need someone else's permission to sign it. So I don't think a state needs someone's permission to unsign it, other than within the borders of California. You guys decide it, and it's your right to do.
I agree. I will point out though that in our movement, we got really big, 2017, and the media kept saying you'll never get the votes, they'll never let you go. America loves you, and conservatives and libertarians would be weeping in the streets if you left. So let me ask you the same question I've asked everybody. Would you be weeping in the streets if California left? And do you know other conservatives, and that's their opinion, is we love California, and if you left, we would be distraught and heartbroken?
I wouldn't be weeping in the streets. You and I had a private email exchange, I think. I don't think it was on the group, where I expressed that I'm kind of heartbroken over where California's gone.
Sure.
I would, at one level, I would be, because even if we were to separate, let's say we separate into 50 different countries, we were a family. I still think, even at 50 countries, we're still probably culturally more like California than we even are like a Canadian or something. To me, I look at it as kind of a family thing. Lots of brothers and sisters. You can separate, you know, every family has that member that disappears for 20 years. That could be California. Hey, we're leaving for a while. Good luck. Whether you ever come back, anyone ever sees you again, who knows? Maybe you do come back someday. That's what I'm saying, is maybe break it up so that we can all take a breather, and hey, you guys don't have to have you can have your crazy cars they're good for the environment, that those of us in Texas and Arizona are like, are you nuts?
I get what you're saying. And Kokesh had a similar opinion. He's also in Arizona right now too, although he's from another state. But I have to pigeonhole this.
Mm-hmm.
You live in Arizona.
Yeah.
You know, libertarians, conservatives, Republicans, people on the right. If California left, do you think they would be so upset?
No.
Okay.
No.
That's well, because the news out here says, yes, you would.
I think they're scaring people. I think, and I can understand it. They're right. The United States is the most powerful country in the world, but maybe we're not. If you look at, we have $23 trillion of debt. I mean, there's the argument of, are you really that powerful if you're that far in debt? Maybe some brilliant economist will come along to figure out how to solve that, but I honestly think we're at a point where the 23 trillion never goes away. So what happens when you get to a German level type of inflation? Again, going back to, not that I'm enamored with them at all, but they're a great example of what happens when a country goes nuts. And they go nuts for legitimate reasons. Their money was worth nothing. So I think even regardless of this topic of our politics being different, there's a point where things start to break down, just because mathematics is pretty hard to cheat ultimately. And ultimately that debt's going to come due somehow. And whether it be a complete, whether it's the 2008 crash times 100, that lasts for, you look at Japan, they went through what, 10, 15 years of in the 90s and early 2000s of nothingness. Their economy just collapsed because it was inflationary upon inflationary, and just it was built on sand, a house built on sand that just collapsed, and they had to rebuild. And I mean, they weren't like, it wasn't Walking Dead. There weren't zombies. People weren't eating each other's faces as they walked down the street, but it was hard times for them. And I still think perhaps a breakup, because you would have to distribute the debt. You can't just leave without taking your share of the debt with you.
Sure.
And like somebody like, I think Daniel Miller, talking about Texit, brings it up that, okay, yeah, we could take, whether you divide it by 50 or you divide it by the number of people in your state, and he has a plan that, okay, Texas, we could take this because we're not paying X amount to the feds, so we can afford to bring on that much debt. And if we were smart and pay it down. So it's not just the discord between our political factions. I think things could just break down on their own. So maybe if we were to logically and strategically break up, if down the road we're like, hey, we really miss you guys, and oh, we miss you too, and all right, let's get back together again. It could go that way. Just because you leave doesn't mean you can't come back.
Other people said that. Okay, so we're approaching the last few minutes. Last statements. Anybody watching this video, and you're trying to convince them to join the coalition, what would you say to them?
Every state has a right to determine its destiny. Just because you might be on the left and I might be on the conservative libertarian side of things doesn't mean I disagree with your right as a state to determine your destiny. Again, going back to the Soviet Union, we totally supported Georgia and Ukraine and Azerbaijan and all those guys going their separate way, but yet our states are chained and can't ever leave. That makes us slaves. California has a right to determine California's future. Texas has that right. Florida has that right. Arizona has that right. And again, I'm not huge on that. I'm not thinking it's terrible, so I'm not at the point of wanting to see that go away. But if the politicians and stuff, and perhaps it could be because I'm looking at leaving Arizona at some point, so maybe I'm just like, whatever. They do it, they do it. If not, I'll worry about it down the road. But the thing I tell people is that my core position is, whether you're liberal or conservative state, you have a right to determine your destiny. Hawaii, there's a big faction of Hawaii that wants to be independent. They feel they were illegally seized back in the 1800s. Well, in my opinion, it's Hawaii's right to determine if Hawaii remains a state or if it becomes the nation of Hawaii. It's just clean and simple to me. It's, how can you say somebody doesn't have a right? How can, as an American, you say someone doesn't have a right to determine their destiny? Or a group of people within a geographic boundary have a right to determine their destiny. They do. It's illogical. America was born as a secession movement. I guarantee no one was asking England, oh, what do you think? Are you guys going to be upset? The American colonies gave them the finger, said, we don't give a damn what you think. We're doing it.
How
We've
How
tried,
pop?
and here when you look at that, they tried for years, for several decades, to work things out, and it got to a point where they said it's not working anymore. We're going our own way. They did the Declaration of Independence, and the big fighting happened kind of after that. There was some before that, but most of it happened after that because England said, no, you're not. I'd rather not get to the point where we have the California American Revolution and we just say, have a nice day and send us some oranges and we'll send you some whatever you want from.
Oh, there's still going to be trade. No one's talked about cutting off trade.
Right. That's what I mean, though. When they bring this fear up, what are they afraid of? It's not like suddenly this wall will go up and nothing can move back and forth.
Right.
You can still get, okay, you have some, basically, maybe it's a bunch of cheapskates that don't want to buy new maps.
Well, I do have to, since you brought that up, I do have to bring up that here in California, we see articles occasionally about Arizonans saying, don't come here. And then we
Oh, hell
saw
yeah.
the senator from Arizona, Martha McSally, say, let's build the wall.
Yeah, I
Do
think
Arizona people?
yeah, I think she tries to be inflammatory like Trump and doesn't really. She should stick to her fighter plane or whatever because she was pretty good at that from what I hear. But I heard that comment. I'm like, oh, really? I mean, you're like kind of recycling the Trump thing there. I'm like, I have no problem with it as long as you every time I've moved somewhere, I kind of adopted the California lifestyle. I voted conservative, but I was proud to be a Californian when I was there. I'm not one of these people. I don't believe in the whole, oh, well, we used to do it like that here or where I was from. You're not there anymore. You're here. Learn how we do it
Huh?
and maybe come up with a fresh idea that we haven't thought of. I'm considering moving to New Hampshire. I don't intend to go there and say, well, in Arizona, we do it like this.
Mm,
I want to go and I want to say, okay, how have you guys done it? And, oh, well, here's an idea. Take it or not.
okay. Last comments. Anything you want to add?
No, just people need to chill out on Facebook and stuff. I mean, I was accused pretty quickly. I think within 24 hours of setting up my page supporting Calexit of sedition, and I had to post the definition of sedition to calm some people down because
Right.
free speech is not sedition,
Correct.
and people just need to chill out and just think it through. It's not going to think it. Do we have a few more minutes? There's
Yeah.
something I've heard once, and I don't know because I've been such a gypsy, but a great majority of people, I'm told, aside from if they go away to college, spend most of their life within a 50-mile radius, aside from an occasional vacation or something. So if the majority of people are spending their life within a 50 or 100-mile radius, whatever it is, every place they live, even as they move up, in career and all that, they're still within this small geographic area. So why would someone from Ohio who was born in Ohio, raised in Ohio, continues to live in Ohio, why do they really care if California is part of America? Let them go. If that's what California wants, why are you so heartbroken over it? It's not gonna change your life at the end of the day. It actually could make it better because I believe you saw an economic boom in the former Soviet Union area as countries became independent and they were no longer under that central government. If I remember right, there was they still struggle. They're still trying to be a first world country. There's still some of them are even third world, I'm sure. But because they were no longer under the centralized government that sucks productivity and creativity out of people, they were able to see a little bit of a boost in their lifestyles. Um, and we could very well see that same thing. California goes its own way. Now suddenly you have trade agreements, and oh, we want this from California, and the oranges or whatever's coming out of there now. I don't even think that California makes Apple computers anymore, but that your life doesn't end. It doesn't turn into Walking Dead because California is now a free country.
That's a
It just doesn't. If that's what somebody's fear is, I can't comprehend the fear of it.
yeah.
How could it hurt? And again, going back to the idea, you can always come back down the road. You know, it's not like, okay, well, you only get one shot to be a part of America, and after that, you're out.
Huh.
You're not. It's, you know, come back if you want. If not, hey, we'll still trade with you, and we're gonna go visit San Diego for the holidays. And
Okay.
San Francisco, if you guys can clean the poop up out of the streets, I'll come back. I miss San Francisco. It's a beautiful city, or was.
I'm not touching that. That's a whole other debate. I will simply point out that states have been caught busing homeless and drug addicts on one-way tickets to California. And no one has done a survey of all the homelessness. And where do these people come from? Are they all Californians? We're 10% of the population and 50% of the homelessness, and we just make everyone homeless, or are other states dumping homeless on us? No one brings that up. And I'm not going to get into that topic.
And as a free country, you'd have a right to stop cars at the border. I remember as a kid when we moved to Arizona. I don't know if through pesticides or whatever they've eliminated, but it used to be even passenger cars, when we would go to California for a trip, you stopped at that Arizona California checkpoint and they inspected your car for any produce, any citrus especially. You had to leave it there. It did not come in because Arizona was worried about some particular gnat or something that was destructive. You can set up checkpoints again, and you can stop any buses that you find are packed full of homeless people and say, sorry, you don't get entry. Because at that point, if you're your own country, then you need a passport and a visa to get in.
And you could stop any buses of undocumented immigrants.
Yeah.
And so we both win.
Right. And yeah, I mean, there's that whole border debate that is kind of ridiculous, but because I don't know that anything's ever going to get done. Both sides want the laborers here, whether it's the left that wants them for what they perceive as cheap and easy votes, or the right that wants them for cheap labor. Yeah, a free Arizona could put a border wall up without needing permission from, you know, some politician in Minnesota signing off on it. You know, we could do it on our own. Texas could put its own wall up. Arizona could put one around on the California border, and
that's right.
I might help build it. I don't know if you know about it. I remember when I took Arizona history, and it may have been a Civil War thing also. It might be why I'm remembering it. Arizona and Texas actually had a naval battle on the Colorado River. I mean, Arizona and California had a naval battle. I remember learning about. You sunk our ship, but we had a naval battle. So that may happen again. We may go to London, Lake Havasu, and have a little battle there on Lake Havasu. We're not sinking very far, but we may go down.
Well, only with renewable energy boats from California. So
we'll let you have your wind turbine boats.
There you go. Yeah. You can have diesel. So
or coal. We'll do. We have a pretty big.
You'll make a coal fire powered 18th century technology.
We're gonna have our steamer ships patrolling the Colorado.
Just to prove a point. Yeah. We built this coal boat just to stick it to you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Debunked ideas, but yeah, we're making it. Okay. This has been great. I will post it and I'll share you a link. And
okay.
If you know anybody else in Arizona who would
talk? When I set this whole thing, I'll go through the page and look. I'm just so busy with life that, like I said, I set my page up as kind of a support page for you guys of, you do have a right to do this and I support it and let's talk about it. And that was where I initially got blasted that first day of sedition. I'm like, dude, I haven't advocated anything. I'm actually not in favor of secession for Arizona, but if they want to, why can't we talk about it? I mean, it was just the talk, and these were mostly, to be fair, these are people on the right, I think, that were blasting me. You can't talk like that. This was decided in the Civil War. Well, no, it wasn't decided. One side just lost. I mean, that's what it comes down to. And the Civil War wasn't about slavery and all that. It was about whether a state can break away, and Lincoln was kind of a tyrant. And that's a whole other topic again.
That's another topic.
Yeah. But
yeah, no.
Yeah.
I'm a history buff,
so there's
and it'll be a 3-5 hour long video.
Right.
Okay, I'll just point out, everybody should look up Lincoln's letters with Otto von Bismarck, the Chancellor of Germany.
Okay.
Both of them were concerned about being able to rapidly industrialize their country in order to not be taken over by the industrial powerhouses of England and Paris. I'll leave it there.
All right. I will look that up.
Yeah. Okay, I'll send you a link soon.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, bye.
All right, we'll see it.